What you can actually see here, the ups and downs of diving in Gozo. That was a sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek. There's not very much in the way of downside of diving in Gozo. It's generally very good. But on the right-hand side, you can actually see Bob, my famous dog. He turned 10 yesterday, and the number of likes and comments and best wishes he got on Facebook was extraordinary. He's very, very well known, is my dog. So I've written up a little agenda. Quick introduction, tell you a little bit about me, my background. Gozo and Malta, what are the main differences between the two big islands? Everybody knows about Malta, not so many people know about Gozo. It's amazing how people come on holiday to Malta and the dive centres don't bring them across to Gozo until the last day. And there's a good reason for it. I then want to talk to you about what I think of Gozo's best dive sites. This is everything that I'm going to tell you tonight, or is my opinion, and I'll back it up or try to back it up with a few photographs. But really, this is other people will have their own opinions. Anyone who has been to Gozo will have their own loyalties to their own dive centres, and forgive me if I haven't recommended the dive centre that you know and love, but I've gone with the ones that I know and trust. That doesn't mean that the others are rubbish. It just means that I know the ones I can trust. I'll then talk about my preferred dive centres, when to come. I'm going to break that down into different periods of year, time of year, when to avoid, when to come, and what are the good bits about them. Where to stay, I'll talk about that in a little, not a great deal of detail, but I'll try and give you an idea of how it works. And then I'll give you a little plug for my own services. Feel free to tune out at that point if you wish. So, me, I took early retirement 10 years ago. I left my job as an executive of an IT company. I got sick of the pressure and the NASDAQ investor calls and so on and so on. And I decided it was time to have a bit more fun. So I packed my bags, I sold my house, I walked away from it all, and I moved to Malta, or moved, more importantly, to Gozo. People used to ask me when I was still diving in the UK, and very often I would get asked, how did you take that photograph, blah, 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 blah. You've all been asked the same sort of questions. And I thought, I might be able to make a living doing this and teaching people. So that's the way it's worked. And I will tell you more about what I do, but that's how I got here. I started diving when I was 15 years old in Anglesey, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And I started taking photographs when I was 6 years old. I was given my first camera then. And fundamentally, I still take photographs now for exactly the same reason that I shot my first roll of 12 black and white shots back then when I was 6. I live, as I've said, in Gozo. I travel across the big island a few times a year, but not that often. We've got just about everything we need. Occasionally, I will travel for clients. I've written for German and French and Swedish dive magazines and visited different countries to do that. Most recently, I was in Kenya a couple of years ago writing for Taucher, the German dive mag. But most of my diving and most of my photography now is Gozo, and I'm quite happy to not travel that much. I also have am a legally operating licensed tour operator. So there are lots and lots of cowboys and lots of people offering to take people diving, but I am one of the few that is actually legal outside of the dive centres. So something to bear in mind. My first camera, I honestly, that thing had 3 exposure settings. I was given the camera for Christmas, and on Boxing Day I woke up and it had snowed. We lived in the countryside. The trees and the woods everything outside was covered in snow, and there was just the tracks of one solitary fox walking across, through the snow, and that everything was pristine, and I thought it was beautiful. And so I wanted to go and shoot off my roll of film and capture that moment of beauty, because it really did strike me, even at the age of 6, as something really beautiful. And in those days, I lived with my grandmother, and she came out with me, and I showed her my camera, and it had 3 exposure settings of cloudy, semi-overcast, and sunny. And I said, which should I use? And she looked up and she said, well, it's cloudy. So of course I shot off 12 frames, and every one of them was vastly overexposed, and I didn't see a thing. But I learned more from that than I would have done if I'd got them all right. This is the scene of my first dive, and where I spent a large part of my childhood, Anglesey in North Wales. And it's funny how things go round and round in circles. When I first got there, one of the locals told me about a submarine that just before the Second World War had been salvaged. It had gone down with all hands on its just about maiden voyage in Liverpool Bay, and it had been salvaged by the Royal Navy, beached here on Mauve beach. The bodies had been recovered, and it was put back into service, and it's now a wreck just not very far from me in Malta. In those days, we had some fairly primitive dive gear, and I dived in homemade wetsuits, a Roth cylinder that you can pump to about 180 bar, and no SPG, no dive computer, and it was a little bit primitive. And of course, I had my heroes. I grew up watching this guy, The Silent World. I was enthralled every week. He had me totally hooked on diving from a very young age. And then along came these two, Hans and Lottie Haas. Lottie particularly added a touch of glamour. And then along came Val and Ron Taylor, and Val again added a very much needed touch of glamour. Either way, and in fact, I actually have a Hans Haas Rolleiflex camera, which I have never taken underwater and never will, but I'll treasure it. And then there's this guy, Louis Bouton. I've actually been to Bagnols-sur-Mer in the south of France, just north of the Spanish border, to dive and to pay tribute to this guy, because he built that box. He made the first underwater camera, and he took the first underwater photographs in 1892, excuse me. Brilliant man. So, Gozo or Malta? Malta is known for its wrecks. That's probably what attracts just about every British BSAC diver. They want to get into the wrecks. We've got some great wrecks from 12 meters down to 250 meters. There is a lot of very interesting rust down there. But I don't think that the marine life is as good around Malta, mostly I think because there's too much runoff, too much pollution. Malta is the smallest country in Europe, if you exclude the Vatican, which is not really Europe. It's also the most densely populated country in Europe. It's tiny. It's got a population of 480,000 people. Malta, bigger of the two islands, probably the better one for all year round diving, because certainly during the winter, the facilities are there because there are the customers, and it's got great wreck diving. The marine life, as I was saying, I don't think is as good as on Gozo. Malta's got better nightlife if you want to be out clubbing and partying every night. It tends to be more expensive, in my opinion, and it's busier and much more traffic. And it's also, because it's bigger, it's harder to decide which side of the island to dive, where it's sheltered, and so on. It takes longer to get there, and when you get there, it's not diveable. It's not so easy to find an alternate. Gozo, on the other hand, is tiny. It's 12 kilometers wide. It's 8 kilometers high. It's 60 square kilometers total area and 40 kilometers in circumference, 37 kilometers. It's It's 20 minutes from one side to the other. From the farthest end, it will take you 20 minutes. If you arrive somewhere and it's not diveable, it's easy to get back in the car, drive somewhere else, and go diving. It's simple. It's 4 or 5 kilometers from the big island. It's a 25-minute ferry ride. The ferry runs all day and all night. Off season, there may be a couple of hours when there isn't a ferry. It's not a big deal. So getting here and getting back to the big island is pretty simple. It's friendly. It's much less developed than Malta. Because of its size, if one side is blown out, go to the other, it's easy. I think generally it's better value and it's more friendly and less commercial. So that's my view. A lot of dive sites. We've got more than 50 dive sites on Gozo. If you look at this map, there's something like 13 there's 13 just listed as shore dives. Add in the boat dives, add in the fact that you can dive in 3-4 different directions at each one. There's more than 50 dive sites very easily. There's plenty for everybody. It's small enough that you can keep going back. If you want to work, if you're serious about taking good photographs, it's worth doing a sighting dive, deciding on getting a shot. The one in the background of this photograph, I knew exactly how I wanted it. I briefed everybody. We planned it carefully. I knew how much separation. I knew which way I wanted each person to point their torches. It was all planned. And it took us, we actually nailed it in 2 dives. But this photograph here, many of you will be familiar with Arthur Kingdon, former BSIT chairman. Arthur came out and spent a week diving with me, and one of the dives he fell in love with was this little dive in Schlendi Tunnel. He got the idea, he conceived the idea for this photograph, and we went back over 3 days, and we kept going back until he nailed it. That's me modeling with the torch in the background. But Arthur was absolutely determined, and he was quite happy to do 3 dives, 4 dives in the same place to get that shot. It was worth it because I think he won something like a £10,000 liveaboard in Indonesia as a result of it. So it was a worthwhile 3 days. Let's just have a quick look at some of my favorite spots. I'll talk in more detail. Weid II Mielah. Weid II Mielah from the other side. So this is the Azure Window that hasn't fallen down yet. It's the northern coast one. The inside of the Karwela wreck. Again, the inside of the Karwela. Tube worms all over the place, of course. Plenty of moray. Amberjack hunting.
Northern Ireland.
It's spectacular.
It's got some fabric page, yeah, and it's slowly expanded to health. So
Pete, could you just make me a host very temporarily, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you just make me a host temporarily, please?
How do I do that?
If you
is that Johan?
Yeah, if you just hold the mouse over my icon, and or you could do it yourself. If you could hold the icon.
Don't worry. I've got to find you first, mate.
Mine's a photo of a shark.
Click on the button that says participants at the bottom.
Well, yes, I'm going through I'm going through the list, and I can't see. I know you're there, Johan, but I can't see you.
Or you could do it yourself. If you find a guy called Joe, I think, and if you just hold the mouse over his icon and click mute, and that will do it.
And what is stuff with brain injury? I'm feeling direct in the second time.
Yeah.
So, they're going.
Hang on, Johan, hang on. Make host. Johan, you're now the host.
Thank you. There you go. All yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's all good.
Cool. So, as I was saying, it's lovely on land. There's plenty to do for non-divers. If you've got non-diving partners, there's everything from photography to climbing to kayaking to mountain biking to art classes, cookery classes. If you're interested in it, I can find a way of doing it, and it's beautiful. The walking is lovely. There's lots and lots of stuff to do. Those of you who love macro, here's a little list. I know you're recording, so you can look this up later, but basically Ras II Hobz, also known as Middle Finger, it's a wonderful macro site. I'll show you in more detail in a moment. Chatlamar, the reef, it's where the wrecks are approached from, but there's always good macro on there, particularly seahorses for the last few years. The Karwela and the Comino land wrecks, I don't know what it is about these wrecks, but they are always or nearly always smothered in nudibranch. It's very, very easy to find nudibranch there. Lots of other life on there as well, but for those of us who like the really small stuff, they're there in plenty. Santa Maria Caves, this is on actually a boat dive on Comino, but I've found over 15 different species of nudibranch on one dive, in one dive site at Santa Maria in the past. It's a really, really great. And the Blue Lagoon, Rabbit Hole, Alex's Cave, lots and lots of good macro stuff in here. Wide angle, Ras II Hobz again. I think it doesn't matter which way you go, that's a great site. Weid II Mielah, I'll show you more details and more photographs from there in a minute, but Weid II Mielah is the north coast. It's a boat dive only, you can't get to it from shore. It's a big rock arch, sort of Gossyton Durdle Door. It's wonderful. Probably my favorite dive site of the entire Maltese archipelago. Karwela and Comino land again. We have actually 3 wrecks on this island. They're all purpose sunk. None of the older wrecks are actually diveable by divers who do not have an archaeological license. We do have some old wrecks, and if you're interested, Google the the Phoenician wreck, Schlendi Phoenician wreck. It's 2,700 years old and well worth learning about. But it's sitting in 110 meters, and it's not an easy dive. So we've got the 3 wrecks. 2 of them are wonderful. One of them not so great because they sank it in the wrong place and it rolled when it hit the bottom, and it's now lying upside down with a couple of 100 tons of concrete sitting in the bilges waiting to collapse on somebody one day. And it's quite disorienting inside. The Blue Hole, always, it's a signature dive, but it's great. Lantern Point on Comino, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And Fungus Rock, one of the least dived dives on the island, but well worth a visit. And I can tell you how to get there. And then night dives, Mgarr Ix Xini, Harbour of the Galleons, that means. It's a long, shallow bay. Apart from during August when it is overcrowded with boats, it's a wonderful dive. I tend to avoid it in August. But as a night dive, it never disappoints. Octopus, cuttlefish, cornet fish, stingrays, you name it, it's there. Schlendi Bay and Masterform Bay are both very, very busy tourist destinations, so Benidorm by the sea, but for night dives they're great. I tend to find that Schlendi, both of them in fact, depress me because there's too much rubbish on the seabed, but at night it's easier to just concentrate on the life, and I find that. Shalimar Reef, during the day, other than seahorses and the usual goatfish and parrotfish and cardinal fish, there's not a great deal of life, but at night it just comes alive. Congers, moray, cuttlefish, octopus. If you don't see 6 different octopuses and 5 different moray on a night dive there, you've had a very bad night. And the Karwela, lobster, octopus, and conger, the conger that you never ever see during the day. These are not the same as your Atlantic conger. These are Mediterranean conger, not quite so big and fearsome looking, but still big fish. At night they come out and they're free swimming all over the wreck, and they're great. My favorite dive sites. Now this is where if I was taking you somewhere, and these are and we only had 2-3 days, these are where I would take you. Weid II Mielah, as I said, it's a boat dive. It's the other Azure Window, huge stone arch. Under the arch, it's about 15 meters deep. Beyond the arch, it runs into a cave, still at about 15 meters. Going the other way, come out of the arch and either turn left, and there's a very deep and dramatic cave. On the right, there's a reef coming up to about 12 meters that then drops away to 50 plus. Dramatic. At 41 meters, there is a matchless motorbike. The water is always gin clear. There's often a good sized shoal of barracuda. Because this is on the north coast, the prevailing winds, particularly in the winter during the winter storms, is northwesterly, and that can give us wonderful underwater worn topology, so we get some really spectacular topology. So let's have a look at a few of my photographs. So that's the arch seen from seen from surface level. This is my lovely wife modeling for me under the arch. The cave goes off behind her. I photographed some free divers doing their stuff and had fun with them. That gives you an idea of the water-worn swim-throughs, and this is at about 18 meters, and there are so many angles and so many different ways to photograph that. It's just stunning. Big shoals of barracuda. Can you see that there's a diver in the background? When I went in to do this dive, the skipper on the boat said, I was here yesterday, or he told me before we'd gone out. He said, I was here yesterday. There's the barracuda there, but they're very shy. You won't get close to them. So I didn't put my fisheye lens on. I put a longer lens on, and I couldn't see my buddy through the shoulder fish. And there again, the arch, fried egg jellyfish in the foreground. Love them. Ras II Hobz, head of bread, that means. Ras, just as in Ras Mohammed, which you're all familiar with. It's Arabic. Ras II Hobz, head of bread. And we also call it middle finger. It's a pinnacle of rock. It rises from, on the seaside, on the deep side, 90 meters all the way up to 8 meters, and you can swim around it in 5 minutes. It's sticking up from the seabed, and it's 30 minutes from the reef. You can swim out to it in literally under 10 minutes. It's fabulous dive. It's on the land above us, there is a sewage farm. The outfall from that of treated water is out at 90 meters, half a mile offshore. But because of the upwellings, we still get a huge amount of life. It is incredibly abundant. We have big shoals of damselfish, and outside them we have big shoals of pickerel. Hunting in amongst them and driving them backwards and forwards, we have amberjack and dentex, and then hunting outside of that we have solitary big barracuda, and occasionally we'll get a shoal of 50 or 100 blue runners come in and devastate the place for a few seconds before moving off, and they really do wake the place up. Fantastic macro sites, as I said earlier. It's a place full of drama. I've never had a bad dive there. 7 or 8 years ago, free diving there, or solo diving there on the outside of it at around 25 meters, and suddenly I saw swimming towards me a veil slug. Its scientific name is Methias fimbria. It's a foot-long nudibranch. And it was it just swam past me. I've never seen one since, but they're normally 40 meters plus on the sand. And this was just free swimming and just doing its thing as it swam past me. It's great. It's a wonderful dive. Few photographs. Dawn dives, light in the morning is always lovely. Night in the evening is great as well. And it's not a night dive. It's not a very productive night dive, but at this time of the morning, the light on it is always stunning. This is the top of it. This is at 7.5 meters and early morning. We have all sorts of interesting characters. This scorpionfish has lived on there for 3.5, 4 years. I've been photographing him, and he just pops up occasionally. You can see this wonderful morning or evening light. I can't remember. I think from that angle, it's probably morning light. Lots of interesting life to be found there. This is I suspect it's. I think of it as a leech's spider crab, but it may not be leeches. It may be something similar. Lots and lots of nudibranch on there, and loads and loads of moray. A few weeks ago, Nick and Caroline may remember I posted about this. I was swimming along at 25 meters, and down below me I saw a big moray. She was well over 1.5 meters long, and she was down below me maybe 45, 50 meters, and suddenly she changed direction and she swam right up to me. She swam up and stopped about a foot in front of me. I put my camera in practically on her nose and shot off a few frames. She then moved away, moved into the reef on my left-hand shoulder, turned round and hung out of a crack literally next to me and let me take a few more photographs. So when I finished photographing her, I thanked her very much and I swam on. And the next thing I knew, she was swimming beside me and she stayed with me for another 5 minutes. It was wonderful. And that's what this place is like. You never know what's going to happen next. The Karwela, I love this. It used to be a tourist boat. It was used to take holiday makers on cruises around the islands. And in 2000, it was cleaned and environmentally cleaned and sunk. They sank the Karwela and the Comino land 1 day apart and 70 meters apart in the same dive site. One they completely environmentally cleaned, stripped back to the metal. The other one they left all the paint on. And this was a sort of biological experiment to see which attracted the life quickest. The problem is that the Karwela is so much prettier than the Comino land that everybody goes there, especially lots of numpty divers who then kick the weed off, and it's difficult to tell whether the weed is growing there or not. And it's still a wonderful dive. Few photographs from that. This is a little bit unusual. Everybody who comes here has to photograph the stairs. It's a must do, and everybody's heard about the stairs. And I consequently am always trying to find a different angle or a different way to shoot it. And this was one where I've actually shot this as an HDR shot. This is 7 shots combined. That's an idea. It's got a beautiful flared bow. It's nice shape. It's very photogenic. Oh, just go back one. If you look down here on the right-hand side, bottom right of this shot, you can see a step ladder. I've no idea where that came from. It's been there for about 3 years, and I've no idea who put it there or how it got there or why. The props are there, very photogenic, 2 props and 3 rudders. And at about 43 meters, it is doable on a single. Back on the reef, some beautiful, beautiful seahorses. Inside, the engine room, I love it. I think it can be very, very photogenic. A different angle on the stairs again. Both of these stair shots are different to anything you're likely to see from you'd have seen unless you've followed me. More nudie brown, they're on the handrails everywhere on this island, on this wreck, and always scorpionfish, always moray, generally octopus. Is amazing what you have here. Mgarr Ix Xini, I love it. Shallow, sandy bottom. I talked about this earlier. It produces all sorts of interesting finds, stargazers. I once walked in March. I was all on my own, and I walked in March. I'd had to hang around on the beach waiting for somebody to walk past to do my dry suit zip up. I can get out of it, but I can't get into it on my own. And as I walked in, normally I would swim out until I've got a bit of depth underneath me and then drop. But on this occasion, I just put my face straight in the water, half a meter of water. And there in front of me was a stargazer sitting on top of the sand. And so as I approached it, it got up and it swam and posed for me on top of a rock, sitting in about a quarter of a meter of water. So I photographed it for a few minutes, and then it got fed up with the flashes going off, and it swam away, and it led me to a cuttlefish. I photographed the cuttlefish for a few minutes, and it led me to, and then it swam off, and I followed it, and it led me to a shoal of about 15 cornet fish. And I hadn't got to 2 meters of water, and I'd already had, what, 3 very nice encounters. It's always good. It's torpedo rays. They tend to be very well hidden. I sort of tried to disturb that one a little bit, and then I felt guilty and left it alone. Cuttlefish, lots and lots of them around. These bream, they can let you get very close and behave nicely. That gives you an idea of the shape of it. This is photographed from up above it. Gives you an idea of the valley. Morays turn up all the time. They're lovely. Seahorses down at the far end, generally they're from 10 to 18 meters. At the moment this year, I'm finding them comfortably at around 13 meters. Octopus, favorite place for finding octopus. They're often out there for hunting. Cornet fish, these are what's called a Lesepsian import. They're not native to the Mediterranean, but they've established themselves very well. They don't seem to be really predating anything heavily, and they're not really damaging the environment, they're just adding to it. But sadly, we also have harpoonweed, which you will all be familiar with from UK waters, but it's now coming into Maltese waters and replacing a lot of our native weeds, and not such a good deal. Flying gurnards. Good tip here, if anybody has ever seen these, they're beautiful with their electric blue edging to their fins, and they're very, very beautiful. But if you swim towards them at the same level as them, they leave, to put it politely, fairly quickly, and they don't want to behave. But if you spot one, rise in the water column, swim, come up until you're at least 3 meters above the fish, because it will be sitting on the bottom. Swim slowly over it and then drop slowly. And as you drop, it will sense your shadow coming down, and it, rather than swimming away, it will just spread its wings and pose for you very nicely. And that's the downside of Mgarr Ix Xini. At this time of year, it is rammed with boats. They're rafted up like this. It's we keep angling for, arguing for permanent moorings and restricted moorings. It's supposed to be a marine protected zone, and it gets no protection. It's very, very frustrating. Blue Hole and Azure Alps, formerly the Azure Window. It's Gozo's signature dive. I frequently, when I go there, instead of going off and doing the usual tour of all the Alps and swimming around, I would just spend an hour in the Blue Hole itself. The light is fantastic. It's great. I'll let you read this when you revisit this later, but here's a few photographs. These are this is some of the rubble field from the Hole and Azure Window. Divers on their safety stop, me lying on the surface and using the light rays to form around me. Great for close focus, wide angle. I was teaching somebody how to get strobe positioning and stuff like that on that occasion. More of the wonderful rubble field. It's so much nicer. My wife posing for me. The trapped air in the cave always creates a mirror. I've never seen anybody else spot this angle, but it works for me. I love it. When the Azure Window fell, the stack fell into about 4 main boulders and lots of little ones. Couple of them rise from 50 meters up to 8 meters, just a single boulder, and you can swim underneath it. 45 meters, you can swim underneath it just like this. It's quite extraordinary. And I have, swimming through that little swim through, I've come across a huge octopus just hanging on the underside of the boulder. Blue hole always gives great angles, and I sometimes just hang there and photograph the divers as they're coming in and going out, and they don't know that they're adding texture and context to my photographs, but suits me. Other places and things to look out for while you're diving in Gozo. They've actually started arriving now. This year, the water is very warm and they're coming in early. Normally, they arrive around the 24th, 25th of August through to the end of September. These are fried egg jellies. I can't remember their scientific name off the top of my head, but they are beautiful. And when we have a good bloom of them, it's just extraordinary. Mauve stingers, always pretty, always good subjects, best in the springtime. And then there's Comino. It's a simple boat ride. It's a 10-minute boat ride away from Mgarr or from Hondok. It's got beautiful caves and a very, very pretty and photogenic wreck. This wreck is sitting in 18 meters on bright sand. It's a very easy dive. Obviously, many open water students get taken there for their first ever wreck dive, but pick the right time of day, and it's a wonderful dive. What I like to do, and I've got 2 or 3 good customers, is we go out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody else is heading home and beer o'clock, and we go out and we get the evening light. We get wonderful warm tones and not another diver to be found. And it's great. Swim off and have a look around on the sand. Seahorses, octopus, stingrays, really simple. I found that stingray and I gently herded it back until it was swimming across the bow of the wreck for me. Bit naughty, but I enjoyed the shot. Alex's cave, another cave on Comino, wonderful dive that you can surface inside it, and if you're into speleology, it's a wonderful bit of caving as well. Lantern Point, when you come to Gozo, you will come very close to Comino on the ferry, and the first point, the first part of Comino that you see is a little spit of rock sticking out, which has the remains of a lantern, like a small lighthouse. And just next to it, there's a very flat reef. It's in about 5 meters of water. And in the middle of that reef, there is a hole. So the boat moors up just above the hole. You step off the back of the boat, you drop into that hole, and you come out at about 19 meters, 20 meters, halfway down the drop off. The last time I did it, as I stuck my head out of the this hole, an eagle ray swam past me. There's always barracuda there. It's very, very beautiful. This is Santa Maria Caves. If you go with a guided boat dive, if you're diving with the dive center, nearly every time they go, they do Santa Maria Caves and they do the P31. And so they don't do the other dives because everybody wants to do Santa Maria, and for good reasons, but sometimes they can get a little bit too busy. It's a 10-minute boat ride out. This is the shot on the right is again Santa Maria Caves. You'll, if ever you have seen the film The Count of Monte Cristo, you may remember that there's a scene where the heroes are recovering gold from a sunken rowing boat. That was on the bottom of this little cave. And this is one more Santa Maria cave shot. I love the place. It's very, very photogenic. And then just back on the big island, you don't have to go very far. There are there's a really beautiful reef and two lovely wrecks. The P29. I haven't dived the P29 yet this year, and I think that machine gun has gone, sadly. It's another patrol boat sunk as a tourist attraction, and the Rosie. Everybody loves the Rosie. She always reminds me of a puffer fish from the left-hand angle, but very, very pretty boat. These are in around 32 meters of water. They're good wreck dive depths. And then Schlendi Bay and the tunnel of Schlendi Bay. I showed you Arthur's photograph earlier. There's always good stuff to be found. Dive centers. There are over 30 dive centers on Gozo. There's too many. And I was rather hoping that the pandemic would sort out some of the stronger from the weaker and that we'd actually get back to sensible numbers. There's too much competition when it's unnecessary. Dive centers, you go to Marselfjord and there's 6, 7 dive centers there, and they're all bitching and squabbling with each other and stabbing each other in the back. And it's pointless because by the time somebody's arrived, most people already know which dive center they're going to dive with. So, you know, our competition are the Philippines and the Maldives and the Red Sea, not each other. But they don't quite see it like that. So the dive centers that I like to work with and that I trust and I know have got good equipment and good facilities and are well set up are these. You may have, as I said earlier, you may have your own people that you like, your own dive centers that you like. These are the ones that I can personally recommend. That does not mean that I'm slagging anybody else off. It's just the ones I like. When to come? We're nearly at the end, by the way, folks. So when to come? Mid-January to mid-March, stay away, generally. As it happens, this year, February was glorious. It was wonderful. But this has been the driest year on record. Normally, mid-January to mid-March is our winter. It can be cold, wet, stormy, humid, unpleasant, miserable. And if I could move away from February, I would. I really don't like living here in February. From March to the end of April, this is our spring and it is wonderful. The water's still cold. I think it's dry suit temperature, but the island is turning green and pretty and spring flowers, bright sunlight, clear air. It's showery. We do have rain, but by this time, there's very, very little runoff. When the water runs off, it is not taking a summer's worth of dust into the water to cloud up. It hardly makes any difference to the rivers when it rains. And what difference it does make, it clears up. The heavy stuff just drops out of the water very quickly. So great time to come diving, but it is dry suit temperature, and a lot of the shops and restaurants it'll be quiet in the resorts. June to mid-July, it's still quiet. This is mid-season. Water's warming up. It's sort of 18, 19 to 25. Great diving. The island's beginning to turn a little bit browner, not so much rain. This year, for example, just to give you an idea, the last time it rained was mid-April. And I expect it will probably rain once. We will have one thunderstorm around the end of this month. Then it won't rain again until mid-October. So very dry, very predictable weather during the summer. So July to mid-September, high season, crowded. Every dive centre's sending people out, sending their instructors out with 6, 8, 10 people. The guides, it's not a good time to be guided diving unless you're with me. Quick plug. Mid-September to end of October. The October tends to be quite rainy. And when it rains hard. It can flood the villages. 2 hours later, it'll be dry again, but there will be zero vis on whichever side of the island it's rained. And that can last for a couple of days before it clears, because all the dust that has built up through the summer is washed into the sea come October. It's also, I'll say this very seriously, a couple of years ago, I was in the hyperbaric center in June. I'd gone to see one of the docs who I know. And I said, have you been busy? And he looked at me and said, Pete, we don't get busy until October when the clubs come out. And he's absolutely right. It's not just the Brits, it's the Germans, the French, but the clubs getting away from the family diving and the people coming out with their kids and so on. The clubs that come out in the latter half of the summer, they frequently are not dived up, are not used to diving clear water, and they think that gives them an extra layer of safety. We have so many bends at that time of year, it's extraordinary. And you should factor in that the weather can be incredibly unpredictable. You can go in flat, calm water, and when you surface an hour later, you can't get near the coast because you will be ripped to shreds on the rocks. The storms can come in really quickly. Take local advice, judge the dive sites by whether other local trucks are there. If they're all hire trucks, don't go in. Only go in if there are local dive centers diving there, because we know when and where to dive. And then November and December. Honestly, the last 10 years, my wife and I have dived on Boxing Day, we've dived Christmas Eve, we've dived New Year's Eve, and we've dived New Year's Day. Christmas Day is spent on the beach in t-shirt and jeans. It's like an English summer. December and November are nearly always lovely. Frequently it'll rain sort of last couple of days of December. First week, 2 weeks of January are genuinely nice, and then it turns nasty again. So that's when to come. Give you an idea of how the weather looks. This is me in January. That's February. That was February this year, turning green. That's March. That's May. That's June. That's August. I took that photograph yesterday. You can see the grass is just burnt to a crisp. Wildflowers are a danger. The only green is the olive trees. But it's party time. That's it's festa time. This is my local village square in August. That's October. That's November. And that's December. So that gives you a little idea of the changing weather. Where to stay? We have, there's not many good hotels that I would really recommend. St. Patrick's in Schlendi, the Calypso Hotel in Marselthorn, the Kempinski upmarket in San Lorenzo in the west of the island, Cornucopia in Jara, and Tachench in Sanat. Those are the hotels, and if you're bringing family, non-divers, want to keep the wives, partners happy, then a good bet. The Kempinski, the Cornucopia, the Tachench all have spas, swimming pools, comfortable, well worth it. I can also recommend that for B&B, the Maria Giovanni in Marselthorn. There are some really good and some really bad old farmhouses. Here on the island, we have some very, very beautiful buildings. My wife and I live in one that is 300 years old. Lots of 300-400-year-old farmhouses. A farmhouse, by definition, if it's out for rental, must have a swimming pool. If it doesn't have a swimming pool, it will be called a house of character. Similar age, similar decor and shape, and vaulted ceilings and so on, bare stone walls, very beautiful, but no swimming pool if in the house of character. Some of them are huge. Some of them will sleep 14, 15, 16 people. If you want to come out as a club group, these are a great option. It frequently works out at 20, 30 quid a night per person. So you can get some really good deals, but you will need to then factor in car hire because they're not in the diving villages. They're not close to the dive centres. Self-catering apartments, plenty of them. Again, if you want something like that, talk to me. I can find the good ones. There is one hotel on the island that is actually busy refurbishing itself at the moment and putting extra floors on, and one of the floors is going to be turned into a hostel with rooms sleeping 10 or 12 people, so that will be a budget option. And then I would avoid the Airbnbs if you can. They're not cheap anymore. They used to be, but they're also unlicensed, unregulated, often expensive, and frequently don't have the fire protection and so on. I would be wary of them. Stick with the officially rated properties are the ones to go with. They're very tightly controlled. To get when you're applying for a B&B license, for example, you're told how many PowerPoints there have to be in a room, how many bedside lights there have to be, whether it can have or should have bedside rugs or carpets, and so on and so on. It's really, really tightly controlled, and a degree of individuality is lost because of that, but you know what you're getting. So just a quick plug for me. As I said, I'm a licensed tour operator. I hope you believe that I know my way around the island and I can find places and things. I work as rent-a-buddy. If you want to travel alone, if you would like a willing, like-minded diver who knows what it is to want to take photographs, not follow the crowd, I'm the guy. If you would like, if there's 2 or 3 of you, you'd like me to take you to the best dive sites at the best time. Don't go when all the other dive centers are going. I'll pick you up early. I don't mind picking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll pick you up late, have a lie-in, and we'll go in after. When they're coming out, we can go in. We'll work around it to the point where most of the time, even on a busy day, I'll get you onto the Karwela or wherever as the only group, as the only people there. All the diving I provide is done through a dive center. I'm not a dive center. I'm not pretending to be. It is all done through a licensed and approved dive center. I provide photography coaching and support for anybody who thinks they can learn from me. Anybody who is just hoping that I can show them something and they can then do their own thing, they're more than happy. So I will offer coaching if asked, but other than that, I will happily just sit and drink a beer with you at the end of the day and compare notes, because I'll dive with the camera. It's part of my waiting system. If you want me to model for you, I don't mind putting my camera down, but most of the time, if I need to go head down, I just move my camera. I can also organize car hires, transfers, hotels, farmhouses, and so on. And I know where stuff can be found. If you turn up and you've forgotten your battery charger, you don't know what restaurant to eat, or you need to organize a birthday cake for somebody in your group, got a problem, something's gone wrong, need to get back early, whatever it is, I can help. And there are my contact details. You can find me email, Facebook, Instagram, and my phone number. So please feel free to contact me. And then I hope I've shown you how much I like Gozo and how special it is, and that I've given you a little taste of how different it is from maybe the Malta that you know. Thank you all very much for listening.